tell you, technology has a huge role to play in creating better customer experience. I know personally, things like being able to, if I finish a book while I'm lying in bed, I can just download the next in the series. Or Chris Beatty was talking about how excited he was the first time he ordered an Uber and he could see the car on his phone. Those kinds of experiences are delightful, but we've all had experiences where you're in that stream and all of a sudden you hit the wall, right? You've been talking to somebody and you purchase something and then you go to the next step and they don't know who you are. And so there's a lot that goes into making customer experience great. And there are two places where things typically can go wrong. One is at the human interface. So that's the human interface between the technology and the employees who are serving customers, or between the technology and your customers themselves. And then the other place that's really critical is in the data flows. So if there are those disconnections in data from one channel to another, one experience to another, that causes huge problems. So in this session, we're going to talk about what those challenges are and how to fix them. We have three terrific speakers who are going to help us work through that. So starting from down at the other end, we have Andy Logani, who is the Chief Digital Officer of EXL. And I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves a little bit. Sharmila Chatterjee is a senior lecturer in marketing and the academic lead for enterprise management at the MIT Sloan School of Management. And Matthias Keller is chief scientist and senior vice president of technology at Kayak. So welcome, all of you. And if you would just start by telling us a little bit about what you do, what is your role, and what do you see as the number one challenge today when it comes to creating a great customer experience?
Want me to start?
Sure.
All right. Post-lunch session, I don't think I'll be sharing anything that you have not already heard. But what I like to do is bring some examples of industries that are highly regulated. Typically, you don't see them as breakthrough customer experience-driven companies because everybody talks about Amazon and Netflix. So we'll bring some real-life examples from traditional industries also, if I could put them that way. So as Abbie mentioned, my name is Andy Logani, and I'm Chief Digital Officer with EXL. What I basically do, or what the team does, is focus on harnessing the power of structured and unstructured data, making sure that you generate insights from these data sources, leverage the relevant technologies, but ultimately deliver business benefits. So we are very, very focused on delivering business outcomes. To Abbie's other question, let me actually take this example and then I'll bring the point home. I'm sure many of you would have heard of this company called Stanley Black & Decker, which is like a tool manufacturer. Interestingly, their CIO reached out to us and their chief operating officer, and they said they have huge problems in this repeat replacement tools that are coming back, the warranties, etc. The customers are not getting the right type of experiences. So first we tried to establish the problem, right? And what we found out that the fundamental experience and the journey is broken. So if you look at the way the customer is interacting, the way these journeys are established, the way replacement works between different channels, it's completely broken. The data doesn't get exchanged, and the insights from one channel to the other channel don't get passed on. So ultimately, what you're doing is delivering a broken experience, and you're not learning from customer interaction. So the first step, we established the reimagined journey and made sure that across the channels it's consistent. Number two, they were capturing all the unstructured data over the years, right? Structured data, sorry. I mean, everybody over the years has sort of created ways to capture structured data. But what was not happening is that between the channels, the intelligence of this data captured was not being passed along. And then thirdly, they had technology stack. So for example, they had this conversational AI engine, but the containment with AI was actually only 5%. Because you had invested in all the technology, but you were not using the data to feed into the technology that makes sense for you and for the customer. So reimagine the journey, made sure the data between different channels, whether it's the online through web, or it's the voice, or it's through the customer service, is all connected. Started to feed that data to the voice channel. 50% increase happened in the containment. The experiences started to come together. We made sure that the knowledge portal is speaking to the conversational AI engine. So obviously we created the database and the data structures and that unified layer speaking to that conversation as that's happening. And in the end, they saw 50% reduction in cost for this entire journey. And B, they actually saw that the customer satisfaction scores went up significantly. I think the biggest fundamental change that at least I'm witnessing to this question is that in the past, you had to make choices between I want to deliver the best-in-class experience or I want to drive efficiency. That's no longer the case. You can actually reimagine the experience and efficiency will be a byproduct. So I just wanted to bring that example as to what I see gets missed. And if you stitch this together, you can really drive meaningful experience and efficiency outcomes.
Great, thanks. Sharmila.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sharmila Chatterjee from MIT Sloan. My research interests lie in business-to-business marketing, and the first area that I have worked on is sales marketing alignment with a special emphasis on sales lead management. And the other area is diffusion of technological innovations amongst users at client organizations. I lead the enterprise management career pathway, and our vision there is to train our students to adopt a holistic, cross-functional approach to problem solving as opposed to a siloed mindset. So to answer your question about the big challenge that companies face in delivering a superlative customer experience, I will talk from the B2B perspective. And one of the biggest things that we see there are the varied priorities, perspectives that the different stakeholders have in the B2B domain, because we have a buying group there. And the different buying groups have different goals and priorities and complex requirements. So when we are addressing, so unlike in B2C, where we have the customer is an individual for the most part, in B2B, it is very different because you are addressing the needs and requirements and priorities of the entire buying group. So the customer experience has to be much more personalized to what each of these stakeholders care about and communicate it. The other important thing, which is critical in the B2B space, is given the stakes, the high stakes, the dollar amounts, the implications if something goes wrong, high stakes. So brand trust is very, very important. So relationships are an integral part of the customer experience equation. And customers are saying, like 78% of the B2B customers are saying, we want a trusted advisor, not just a salesperson. At the same time, salespeople are spending just a third of their time in really active selling. So we need help. Relationships, of course, cannot be outsourced to technology, but salespeople can hopefully have a pilot, a co-pilot using data and analytics to then free up some of their time to be able to really do the value-added activities, including relationship building. Thank you.
Interesting that what you both said there sort of intersected across the dimensions of customer experience. And B2B is so challenging because there is a reluctance to adopt some of the new technologies, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Matthias.
My name is Matthias Keller. I'm the chief scientist at Kayak. We just celebrated 20 years of the first launch, and we are well known as the world's leading consumer travel product where people come to compare flights, hotels, and cars. For the last couple of years, we also started to be in the B2B sector with our product called Kayak for Business, where we have large corporations with thousands of travelers who we are working with on very innovative concepts such as directly booking with the airlines, cutting off certain middle layers, getting alternative payment powered by the blockchain, and many, many things that I think fit in here. But taking a step back and explaining what multi-channel means for us, let me give you an example of what I think would be a great experience of how you would use Kayak as a traveler. Imagine you realize you really should do something over summer and you want to get away. You could start with one of our generative AI products and ask about destinations, family-friendly, nice beaches. Maybe you're interested in, I always say I'm interested in seeing penguins, and you could start looking for your destinations, and maybe the first interaction point, and this could be on your phone. So for us, multi-channel, we are all digital, but we have the web and the phone, and then before booking, and after booking. So like you start making your first ideas, maybe you add it to the wish list, you start getting emails from us, hey, we are thinking prices to one of your destinations that you like are going down or up. You use our tools to get a better idea of the dates. You may set up something which we call a price alert, and suddenly there's a sale going on, and in the morning you open your phone and there's a push notification that prices just dropped $400 and you should go booking now. You may continue. We still think booking is still, personally, I like to snack what we say on the phone, but I like to book on the desktop. So I go to the desktop, I book my trip. That trip may be with the airline. You can now feed it back into Kayak, into our trip management solution. And now once we start traveling, I start getting a notification that the check-in is about to open. I get a notification that there's maybe some delay on the horizon. If I have an Apple iOS phone, I start this live activity, which is like on the lock screen. It starts showing that we have like a flight coming up and what the status of it is, that the gate was just announced, and all the information that we have. And there are all these multiple touch points where like sometimes I get an email because we know you're interested in this destination, and the prices are the same as last week. But sometimes I get a push because there's an urgency. The prices are much cheaper right now, or your flight just was canceled. And so it's all within our own ecosystem, but the channel really changes on the urgency and on kind of like where you are in your journey. Are you just about to think about going somewhere, or are you really in the middle of booking something?
I'm just going to add maybe a thing to Matthias' point here. I think you asked this question upfront, Abbie, but see, the brand and consistency of the experience is what the brand ensures in terms of, okay, this is how you can engage with us, and that's the brand. The promise of the brand actually comes to fruition as to how Matthias was describing it. You switched from one channel to the other, but your experience did not get broken. You were able to take the data from one channel to the other. You're not frustrated that I have to repeat the whole transaction again. I just uncompleted my journey. You'll be surprised. So many companies do not use these insights from one to the other channel, and they don't drive those insights to deliver the right experience for the customer. And then at the end of the day, sometimes you'll be amazed. It's technology or the hammer chasing the nail, forgetting that what promise do I want to deliver to my customer and what experience do I want to deliver, and actually work backwards versus I have AI, I have blockchain, I have this, and I want to use it somehow. And that sort of is a big B2B context problem. There's a chief data officer, there's a chief AI officer, there's a robotics guy, there's some other guy, and everybody has their own agenda because they have a set of tools that they want to go with. That's not what the customer's dealing with. So I think that's what I love about Matthias' story, that at the end of the day, it's an experience you want to deliver, and everything corrals together. You exchange information and the data sets, and you become smart and intelligent for that customer and engage with them in the way they want to engage with you.
I think at a lot of companies, and so what you were talking about, Andy, was that sort of the cross-channel sharing of data, but then there's also the inside the organization, because a customer experience isn't just about a purchase. It's really about starting from the search and then going through the purchase and going through the servicing. And so that inside an organization, that crosses a lot of different functional areas, right? It involves IT and marketing and customer service and delivery and all of those things. And so what I see as a big challenge with customer experience is the breaking, these silos, whether it's this way or that way, these silos that have to be, penetrated or connected to make that experience happen. So let's talk about both the data silos and the organizational silos. And Andy, I'm going to start with you on the data silos, because that's something that you and I have talked about a lot. So how, what is the big challenge for organizations right now, companies that you're working with, and how do they go about solving that problem?
I think part of the answer actually lies in your question. Let's take an example of an insurance company, like real quick. So at the time you're dealing with them at a prospect stage, you're captured as a lead. The moment you're in the new business and you become a customer, you're tracked as a policy. The time you apply as a claim, you're a claim number. So it's the same customer, and even within my data set, I have like 3 different work backwards. So that's kind of the first part of it. The second thing to that question is, now, even if you track this data at different sources, what's happening is that you're not learning from it, and there are no insights that are getting generated, and then you're not getting the relevant outcome. So I'll just give an example of a bank here very quickly. Yeah.
What you mean by working backwards? So you don't have to create a data lake. So
when I say working backwards, what I'm trying to say is that at times people are challenged that, okay, do I have to now start working and creating a complete entire data lake for the company? To that, my point is, look at the business outcomes and the benefits that you're driving and work backwards. So a set of journeys, journey by journey, you'll keep building it, and you will also be able to see between journeys how experience is shifting, and you'll be able to harness that data. So I think that's the point I was just trying to highlight. And so this is a classic example of bank. Across the world, the banking debts are rising, and so we were dealing with a South African bank, and they said, we are actually losing a lot of money, and we have a potential to increase our collections. So the first thing that you did is you actually have to understand your customer, their profile, where is the likelihood of the default, and maybe this customer typically wouldn't have defaulted, but it's maybe circumstances that are there, right? So first you understand the insights and the data. Then we actually connected the engagement layer. An engagement layer is, how do you interact with the customer? Text, WhatsApp, call, whatever channel you interact with. But every time what you're learning is, you opened an email, the email has been opened, the person still has not responded. Let that go back to the insight engine. Now let me change my next interaction slightly differently so that I attract the outcome. Or then with the text I offered, okay, now you've responded, and you say, hey, look, would you be willing to pay? And you suddenly saw $17 to $20 million increase in collection by creating and understanding the data, understanding the interaction, and then linking the two, which is now connecting multiple departments. Today what happens is, experience get designed separately, data work separately, and you do not connect that boundaries. And I think that becomes very powerful. The last point I'm going to make to this, and then we can sort of move on to this topic. There's a lot of talk about AI and how data fuels AI. I'm not saying those are not important things, but there are many things that comes together. There is workflow, there is your robotics. It's actually collective power of a lot of these things together actually drives a much more meaningful impact. So data and AI is important, but there are several other things that you can bring and stitch the story. So as you're interacting, it's the workflow. As you're getting the response, you're tracking and feeding it back to data. So these are things you stitch together to deliver the output that you want to deliver.
So I want to stick with the data for a minute and ask Matthias, so you're working with all these different partners within the travel ecosystem. It's not all your systems and all your data. Talk a little bit about how you manage to keep that consistent experience for your customers.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Let's take a step back. So ideally, from our own perspective, we have a unique view of the customer with a caveat that you have to forward us your booking receipt. Like Delta Airlines can't give us your booking receipt. You have to give it to us because you want to use our tool. But what I want to say in silos, what's an interesting problem that we see is like there is one example is regulation. Like every data point may have different strings attached. Like I may have a partner that says like you can remarket to data that you get from us, or there is another partner that says like, well, we are in the EU, so there's GDPR. California, Texas, everyone has their own regulations. Korea, Latin America, it's every data point has its own little guardrails. And the other thing I want to point out is then the proliferation of cloud. Let's say I have a cloud-based email sending tool. So I may have the perfect view of the customer in my data center, but now to send them email or to use somebody else's CRM interface or whatnot, I now have the synchronization and now the classic problems where it's like the source of truth. Of course, that is my in-house database, but then how do you keep them all in sync? Then, of course, you have the problem with personal information. When does it become data sharing? When is it just using a technology provider? That's really where I think for a business like us, the challenge lies. It's not as much ourselves. Of course, marketing wants to run a raffle. They want to run a promotion. So that maybe brings another system into the picture. But really for us, it is the biggest challenge is the different systems in the cloud, and it's the regulatory frameworks around the use of data.
So, Sharmila, I know it's very different in the B2B space, but when we talked about sort of those different stakeholders in the customer experience, whether that's IT, marketing, customer service, and then you talk about the experience, the relationship with your customers, where there's a lot of concern around what you're doing with my data. Can you talk a little bit about what it takes from an organizational perspective? I saw a really interesting study recently that I think it was Deloitte Digital said that chief experience officers overwhelmingly said they had support from the CEO for their customer experience efforts, but they were really challenged with collaborating across those different functional silos. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have actually worked in the domain of sales marketing alignment for quite a long time, and have seen this firsthand. Sales and marketing do not have the best of relationships. Let's say that it can be somewhat adversarial. And so in one of the studies that we did, we were looking at funnel management. And this was what we call the sales lead black hole. 70% of the leads generated by marketing are not followed up by the salespeople. And so marketing was basically blaming sales, saying that, oh, this is an enormous wastage of resources. And think of the customer frustration when they do not hear back from us. So this is pre-purchase, right? The pre-purchase stage. And sales, on the other hand, was saying marketing should actually thank us. We do not follow up on the leads because they do not work. They are worthless. And the reality was somewhere in between. So we actually collected data to see what were the facilitators of lead follow-up and the business outcomes of that. And we were working with, actually, it was a cross-industry study working with multinationals. So there were leaders in, there were leaders in computer, chemical industry, construction industry, and another technology space. And what we found was, so it was across industry, we did all the right tests to see, the data was poolable. And actually, for one of the companies, it was true that the salespeople were doing them a favor by not following up with the leads because the leads were really not useful. But on the other hand, in the other cases, there were a myriad of factors of coordination and this perception issues where the salespeople were not engaging in new business development as much. They just kept upselling and cross-selling, which actually did not attain this organizational outcome. So there was very much, again, we are coming to that mindset, different priorities. There is a great research that shows the thought worlds of sales and marketing. Marketing more sort of long-term brand, the brand trust kind of driven sales is, of course, they have to meet their quarterly quotas and so on. So the time frame difference, product focus versus client focus. So there are the different thought was, which actually is good. You do not want groupthink. You definitely want different perspectives, but there is a happy medium, and that is where the functional silos come in. And we talk about sort of, the 3 C's of good customer experience. Communication is key. You need to communicate to understand each other's perspectives. That will facilitate, hopefully, coordination. And then that allows you to customize and give these personalized, customized experiences, because 84% of customers are saying, you need to personalize if you want my business. So these are sort of precursors to a good customer experience, but the human element, the different priorities and so on, definitely need to reconcile.
Great, thank you. Building on the personalization issue, analytics is huge in being able to deliver the kind of experience that customers want, and being able to get the value, being able to understand, okay, what are the outcomes that we want, and is this particular customer path going to get us there? So the conference theme this year is the Goldilocks paradox, which is, not too hot, not too cold, just right. And when it comes to analytics, there's something going on where, there's a customer privacy issue with the privacy of customer data. But on the other hand, if you put too many controls in place on the customer data, you can't use it. On the other hand, if you go to the max to be able to make full use of customer data, you risk exposing people's data in ways that are not good for your relationships with your customers. So, so can you address how do you manage that balance between privacy, managing the risk on the privacy side while capitalizing on these the new capabilities of analytics? And I don't know, you want to take it?
What I can say, how we solve it is that, so traditionally, if you're in the business of credit card processing, you may have heard of a cardholder environment, which is usually a section in your data center where only the fewest personnel can go to make changes, and everything is really monitored. And we took that idea, instead of PCI, we call it the PII bubble. So the source of truth of all the customer information is in a highly secure area that we try to not touch as little as needed. But then we have all these anonymized copies that go out for analytical purposes. And let's give one example, right? I mean, I may want to run analytics. Well, what destinations are the most popular for people who book trips? So I only have to export, so to speak, the destination, but I don't really need to know who they are. I don't need to identify them. And so in our case, we're trying to sort of like get away from the need to identify anyone as much as possible and really work with this aggregate intelligence, which of course it becomes now a little bit, this doesn't work when you're, let's say, doing customer support. Like if you have a problem with a certain ticket, I need to see your ticket. But for the biggest part, we have this special zone that we call the PII bubble, personal identified information, and we try to work with aggregate information and make it then democratically available to everyone as much as possible. Because if you think about it from the design perspective, if your credit cards are mixed in everywhere, basically nobody can touch anything. But if you get all the credit cards and other personal information, which goes down to email addresses or even IP addresses, depending on the region where you are, if you take that all out and anonymize it away, basically now everyone can access the data and your risk of exposure is the lowest.
Andy, what are you seeing around your customers in managing that balance?
Yeah. Look, I think one, it's very clear that the line between the data and the model is getting blurred now, especially in the generative AI era. As you're hearing about, more models will become the foundational models are pre-trained, but you'll get more custom models which will be domain trained, small models. That's the world that we are sort of getting into. So one clear opportunity is people who believe in this, they think it's the most underhyped thing that you've ever heard of. Now, obviously, there's the other side which believes it's overhyped, but it won't be very hard to guess which side I'm on. But that's one thing. Secondly, with generative AI and with the analytics, unstructured data and harnessing the unstructured data is actually the biggest opportunity, which essentially means that you have to start treating your unstructured data as a first-class citizen. Historically, unstructured data wasn't treated like that. It was stored in the cheapest possible way because it was odd use case based. Privacy wasn't very well thought through. The indexing and labeling wasn't very well thought through, and that's the true power. So there lies the opportunity. To your point about the paradox, if you look at the other side, I mean, you can really expose the company and the reputation if this is not handled properly. So there's a lot of things that we do, but just at a very high level, right at the time of use case selection, you're asking the right questions. What data do you need? Why do you need it? Actually, in some ways, we recommend an approach of data minimization, which means only collect data that you need and don't get into data that you don't need. Thirdly, it's putting all the appropriate controls and guardrails, right? And there is this whole notion around, as you start working with data, people will tell you redact it, make sure you put proper prompt controls. But I will tell you, some of the best companies that are promising you redaction and making it complete free of PII, PHI, it doesn't happen. So after doing that, you still have to put appropriate controls in place. And then lastly, I always say that, look, let's be mindful of the outcome that you're trying to deliver, and then then accordingly work backwards, because that will dictate your data strategy.
Hop to our last question because we're getting the 10-minute mark here, and we can't have any session these days without talking about generative AI. So the question is, lots of companies are experimenting with the use of Gen AI, both internally and to a lesser extent externally with their customers. So Matthias, how are you using Gen AI in the customer space at Kayak?
Yeah, so I think we are looking at this theme of productivity during travel planning. And so we actually just in March launched 3 externally facing products that are as clear as generative AI as it can get. The first series of these products is something we called Ask Kayak, which is really the idea of an assistant. It is not an experience where you just have your friend that you're chatting with, but it's going after 2 specific problems that we think our users have. The first problem is finding interesting destinations. So that goes back to my example of a penguin or white beaches where I can, ride on horses. And the other thing we are trying to use generative AI to help people search better, or like redefine their searches better. Like they come to Kayak, they search for hotels. If we don't have a lot of context, there might be thousands of options. If you think of a city like Paris or Rome, or if you think of flights, and they can now use free text inputs to filter that down. I want to have a morning flight, 5 stars. It can get a little bit of more, instead of just saying directly, I need a pool, you can say, I really think I need some refreshment or stretch my legs or whatever you say, and then it may pick that up as well. And sort of a bit orthogonal, but part of the same strategy to that is also a completely new innovative product, which we call the price check. And let me explain you how that works, is that, let's say you are really about to finish booking a flight. Let's say you are on an airline page and you want to have, and Kayak is really about search and comparison. You want to make sure that you find the best flight or hotel, and in this case flight, for the best price. So you're just about to sort of like hit pay now. You take a screenshot of that other page, of that other side. You put it into the Kayak app together with Vision and ChatGPT. We reproduce, we find that exact flight on Kayak and compare it one more time to give you this one last verification point. What I'm doing here is like a great price, and I haven't overlooked any sort of other connection. And the interesting thing here, what I want to point out is this is consumer-facing features. The interesting thing about these 3 products I just mentioned, most people working on these were not data scientists. So there is this, I'm not sure if it's called democratization, but now having this technology available, if you are a great engineer, you can now build really magical products with the help of generative AI. And these are certainly only the beginning. We are also, you can use Kayak on ChatGPT itself with what they call GPTs. You can also use Kayak inside the Microsoft Copilot. This is a little bit the other way around, like bringing us to the LLM. But yeah, it's exciting, and we are really thinking that it is going to be in the productivity side of things during travel planning and booking.
So are we seeing the end of all those filters you have to go through and check off?
That's the Ask Kayak, exactly. You just put in what you that you don't want this airline or that time, and we select it for you. Yes.
And any particular things that your customers are doing in terms of the customer experience with Gen AI?
Yeah, I think so. The ones that are mature, very much like what Matthias talked about, they have created a search engine, a GPT version of it. They are all experimenting with 15, 20 use cases, and they are doing Copilot. So that's a common trait. I would say the ones that's separating the good ones from the ones that I would say that they claim to be good ones. So number one, people think it's a great efficiency tool, and I will tell you there is an unbelievable tool for reimagination. So you can really think about delivering experience completely differently, and I'll just give you a very quick example of that. And the second thing I will say is, see, people will talk about talent proficiency on generative AI. I have seen some companies do some really cool things. You have to separate your talent into two buckets. There is one that works on the AI, and then there is one that works with the AI. Like Matthias talked about, like probably everybody will be working with AI, but not everybody will be able to work on AI. So you can't train everybody upwards to be proficient. So people have some smart companies have divided them into certain categories. They are doing assessments and understanding who belongs where to what level you can take it, but you're kind of dividing the group into the bucket. Just a quick example, one of the customers on customer experience, you mentioned about the service side. The first question they ask is, why should you be in touch with me? Actually, you should not be in touch with me if you don't need to. So they are thinking about the customer should not be in touch. If they want to be in touch, we want first AI to handle. But if the AI can't handle, then you want the associate to be equipped with the AI. By the way, with them, they are not strong believers of prompting and getting response for prompting, because prompt engineering has a cost. There can be latency. We are working with them more to AI become the true guide and give them the nudge for the next best action, using the knowledge management, using the data to drive the next best action. So it's reversing the pyramid. First, you're eliminating the need to be in touch. When you come in touch, it's with AI or through portals. And if you decide to speak, then AI is assisting you to be smarter and better. And we are seeing great results with them in terms of what they're delivering to the customers. Already live with 6 million calls and 6 million interactions that they do in different channels, and it's delivering great results for them.
When you and I talked before, we talked a lot about trust, and the trust that you have with a customer, whether in B2C or B2B, and sort of there's a risk when introducing new technology that could have an impact on the trust. Can you talk a little bit about what companies should look out for as they're rolling out these new capabilities?
Yeah, I think that at the core of brand trust is really reliability and integrity. And so, and brand is very much a function actually of customer experience. So it's very, very important that I think from a marketing point of view, that AI or data is helping hopefully deliver superior customer experiences. But as you were saying, that there are many companies where we do not have a seamless and consistent brand experience across platforms, across channels. And in the use of Gen AI, one of the things that I have seen is when I talk to some of the companies is they are expecting a lot will change when they use AI and they roll it out, and their workforce is going to start using it as part of their customer interactions. But one issue is that I have seen this in our research that was done. There is real difference in the proclivity of the workforce the comfort and use of technology. And there are two main dimensions. One is what we find is called sort of this digital mindset, the belief. So the first dimension is the belief that the employee believes they can adapt or adopt and grow with the technology. And the others believe that they cannot do so. So there is this growth versus fixed mindset. The other aspect is if they are viewing this Gen AI application as a facilitator or a competitor. And so there is this, expandable versus what they call the zero-sum mindset. So Gen AI, assuming that, it can deliver, but one has to be very careful that it is really adopted by the workforce. Because if not, all the promises and the potential cannot be realized. And rewards and punishments only go so far. So the big elephant in the room is the organizational culture. So how do you intrinsically motivate the workforce to really go with it and therefore deliver on the promise of Gen AI, as opposed to being this disconnect between your promise and what you actually achieve, resulting in a loss of brand trust?
Just as it's always been, it's not about the technology, it's about leadership and making sure that all those pieces are in place. And I know we sort of ran out of time for questions, but I think there's a little bit of flexibility. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free. Yes.
Great discussions, thank you. If we look at the customer journey, we would start with sort of a stranger who doesn't know much about what you're offering. We move to a visitor, then we move to a lead, then we move to a customer. And if we push the envelope further, we go to an advocate. Can you focus on the advocate part and share with us some perspectives on how are you advancing that through Gen AI or latest technology?
Do you view that as part of the customer journey to get to that advocacy place, and what's the secret sauce?
I'll start. But so some of the companies who've done great work, I absolutely think that they put disproportionate amount of focus on customer advocacy. And by the way, when I contact you, when I am your customer and you know me, that's all become table stake now. At least from a customer's lens, that's hygiene. The moment you're able to give advice and give them the next best action in terms of this is a recommended thing that you should be doing, and when you get to advise, that's when they start to value that relationship truly as an advocate versus everything else honestly is an advice. So today, if you go from one channel to the other and your data gets passed on, you're expecting that. You got in touch with somebody and they said, hey, this is the reason you got in touch with me, they're expecting that. But I think when you are truly an advocate, when you are able to help them, guide them with a resolution, and give them a recommendation which help them make a choice which otherwise they wouldn't have. That separates the advocacy versus everything else that you mentioned.
I have a two-part question. Question one is, one of the main focus areas is about propensity to sell or retain and cross-sell, upsell. So in our current landscape with so many siloed off-the-shelf tools, and if you truly want to understand customer sentiment, it has to be 360 degrees all the way from when you were prospecting to all the way there's a customer support ticket, and how did you actually answer the ticket? Did someone get frustrated, right? Do you think every company has to do a custom solution for that? Because that is so important for any of this to happen. Is that always a custom solution, and you think that'll always be a custom solution? The second is, I think we talked a lot about siloed organizations not talking to each other. Is there an organizational structure solution to it where you combine all the operations teams into one place? So marketing ops and sales ops and CS ops and product ops they can work together. To your point about sharing information, and will that somehow solve for this end-to-end view?
So I think the number I heard yesterday was we have about 7 or 8 sources for sort of like customer feedback. And it starts with, we certainly have like, you can write directly to our support team. We have 2 app stores, the iOS app store and the Android app store, and people would go in there, like the price didn't match, or whatever they want to say. We have a feedback form on the site where you can just give feedback. There's a CES score widget that we have, and I can't get the other 2, but not all of this is in-house, right? Like, so the app stores obviously are run by Apple and Google. The feedback form, we use another vendor. We also have a UX. We have like UX focus groups. We have we're analyzing how people use the site, and yes, interesting enough, like ChatGPT is the first interesting cut in getting that all together in a summary. Like if you look at like hundreds or thousands of App Store reviews, ChatGPT is actually a great tool to, okay, can you categorize this? What is it all about? But I want to say that the struggle here is real, and we are just an online channel.
So that's a great question about whether or not, just proximity, and so that they can communicate and coordinate together. One of the big issues that continues to remain is sort of the different perspectives and their focus on micro KPIs. So now it is still important for there to be this macro KPI that helps them. So maybe putting that superlative customer experience is celebrated across all levels, be it operations, be it marketing, be it R&D, whatever. So if there are these macro KPIs, I think they will do a better job of pulling everyone together, where everyone celebrates in the success of this sort of overall goal that they are. There's a great example. There's Puerto Rico, there's a $10 billion multinational spirits company. So they had this, they were focused on micro KPIs. Finance was looking very much at profit maximization, and then marketing and sales were looking at market share optimization. And then actually they incorporated AI there to create this macro KPI, and they were doing sort of simultaneous optimization so that they will not get tapped into this very short term, maybe I am focused on just growing my market share, cutting dramatic prices, but really hurting margins. So what is sort of a joint optimization of this macro KPI? So if we are trying to do this pre, during, and post customer journey excellence, and a role is played by each of these units there along the customer journey. So having this macro KPI and everyone celebrating that might do more. Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah,
I'll just
exactly.
add one bit quickly to your first question. I think you hit the nail on the head. Firstly, you defined what outcomes you were going for: retention, cross-sell, upsell. So now you have something you're solving for. Half of the problem is sometimes people don't know what they're solving for by creating Customer 360, and those are great use cases for that. Secondly, then you actually work backwards, because you're right, ultimately it's a data problem. It's in silos in different areas, and it requires to bring it together. But you know what? We typically see immediately with lifetime value measurement, you see an up in retention. With this advisory, we call something as Agent 360. We know 220 data sources that are important. We know where that data sits. You actually bring that data together. You actually create a view, and actually you harness external data. In some cases, there are data sources that are available, and US is a little bit more relaxed than UK. And you can bring those external data sources to actually enrich the data and ultimately solve for that outcome. If you don't have the view to the outcome, just creating views for the sake of views is probably money spent with no returns. I think you're exactly right. Today, it's sort of developed, but a lot of things have come together because you can bring data. If you're using, Matthias talked about you have a particular hyperscaler stack. So you're using these technologies that are all cloud native. It's all API. So it's not as difficult as it used to be, because earlier you were sort of burdened with legacy and different data structures. Today, the next generation of cloud is all about innovation. It's not just about data storage. And I think that's sort of going to change this.
tip of the iceberg here, I have a feeling, but thank you so much for sharing your experience and insights with us.